In the year 2035, I saw Bruce Willis's butt.
Yeah, like, am I supposed to be like, I saw yours yesterday? Although we've been on since, I've seen it anyway. But yeah, for
Yeah,
yesterday's podcast, he didn't lock his apartment, so I went in right as he was scurrying into the bathroom for the post gym shower or whatever. So I just called him out on it. Yeah, that is true. But again, we do two of these sometimes and stop by the Japanese hot spring, so it's all fun and games, right?
yeah, we've seen everything before.
Okay. This is I was introducing myself, I guess. This is Matt.
This is Luke.
Welcome to the early morning Sci-Fi Sanctuary, where we're talking about 12 Monkeys, unless you are our guest today, in which case it is the late evening. Luke, you want to run that one?
Yeah, so we're joined by guests who I first heard on the QAnon Anonymous podcast, but don't worry, that's not a podcast for people who believe that stuff.
Thank you for saying that.
That's the reaction I always get when I tell people I listen to it. It's like, no, it's not that.
I'm Mr.
How bad do you think it is working for it?
Yeah, I can imagine. But also more recently, the host of Vaccine, the Human Story. Again, it's not like that, but a very, very good podcast. So we're joined today by Dr. Annie Kelley.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting episode, I think, because for you guys, it's really early morning and you've just got up. And for me, it's quite late and I've had like half a bottle of wine. So we may be on very different tracks on this movie.
Weirdly, we compared to yesterday's podcast, I'll probably be more coherent because I have a week's worth of bags of medicine, for better or for worse. And yesterday I was like totally spacing out somewhere and making 0 cents or 2% sense. What was my sensometer?
Yeah, it was up and down. You would always make the start of a point and you just didn't finish any of them.
It's like Tom Cruise.
I mean, this is the perfect movie for that, actually, because it felt like the whole thing is about how people seem like they don't make sense and they seem crazy, but actually they're perfectly lucid. You just don't have all of the information.
Yeah, it did a really good job of making me feel frustrated for the characters. Not like being able to explain things.
I will bring the 6 a.m. and say, did we say the movie yet?
Yeah, he said it is 12 Monkeys.
Yes. So yeah, I guess there's a line between like being lucid though and being socially functional, which I mean, if I'm not socially functional but I'm lucid, it's still kind of crazy. So I'm right, but I'm crazy. As for me, I think I saw this movie opening night. I would have been in somewhere in high school when it came out, and this would have been the point where I think my friends and I would just bop on over to the theater every Friday and possibly Saturday night just to see the new releases. I saw many dull movies. This was not one of them. I went out on release day to get the VHS and watch the crap out of it. But I think I haven't seen it for the past 15 to 20 years. So it's kind of fun to get back into it. And Luke, you said you think this was your first time?
Well, I remember it existing and coming out. So as a kid, if it was like Schwarzenegger, of course I watched it because I knew it was action. But Bruce Willis could go either way. He did real films as well, like he acted. So I remember it coming out, and I remember it being on. Like my uncle watched it or my parents would have watched it. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is just a boring film for people who want to see people talking and not really paying attention. And I felt like I must have watched it in the intervening years. But then when I watched it last night, I was like, no, I don't think I've seen this film before.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I watched it as a kid when I was poorly, and my dad got it for me like as a bit of a treat, just to be like, oh, I've got you some movies to watch while you're feeling sick. And I just remember being like, this is just the worst trash I've ever seen. Like, this is really tedious. It's really like weird looking. I don't get it. I feel ill already. And then, there's all of this kind of sort of what I would later learn as kind of a sort of Gilliam grotesquerie kind of to the aesthetic. And yeah, I know I really didn't like it. And then I remember trying to watch it again as a teenager and kind of just being like, you know what, it's just not for me. And then I watched it tonight, and I don't know, something clicked for me. I was just like, this is fantastic. I finally get it. I've finally become my father. And I understand why he thought it was such a good movie, because it just all clicked together this time. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I was thinking watching this when you're sick is not cool. It's like first time I saw Castaway was the night before a transatlantic flight. So sometimes timing is everything.
Yeah, I do feel like the movies that you watch when you're sick do like get this like very specific feeling for you as well. There's some movies that I like even now I can't come back to without feeling really ill. The Wolf of Wall Street is one of those for me. I watched it when I had really heavy flu, and every time I try and watch it now, it starts to make me feel a bit feverish. I don't really know how to explain it, but
yeah, for me, when I'm sick, it's like people are like, oh, well, you got time to sit around and watch the films you like, listen to the music you like. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not gonna like it anymore if I do that. So I tend to just stare at the wall a lot when I'm sick, which isn't very often, fortunately. But let's see. A few days ago, I took an actual sick day, and what did I do? I edited podcasts because let's face it, it's not that fun anyway. Yeah, I play a lot of musical instruments. I didn't even do that till like later in the evening for like 15 minutes. So I avoided that, I think, purposefully as well. Yeah, you don't want to associate, things you like when you're feeling crummy. I watched a really terrible episode of Star Trek, but it's one I won't watch again. So
yeah, I have sort of learned that's the trick actually, to when you're sick, you just like have to find something that you'll never ever watch again and just sort of be like some terrible show on Netflix or something, and just be like, all right, you're getting my time now.
I remember binging all of The Defenders when I was feeling sick.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
You're just like, I have no attachment to this. I'm never going to want to watch this again. Let's go.
As a kid, I would just watch whatever was on TV, which means I would end up watching all of the like preschool television, like Teletubbies. But I'm talking about when I'm like 10, 11, 12 years old.
Yeah. Then you would like move to like middle-aged people or like old people TV as the day went on, and it would all be sort of talk shows and things like that.
Bargain Hunt and Antiques Roach.
Jeremy Kyle, if you were lucky. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It was weird. In the waiting room a few days ago, they had the Japanese kid show, which I just hadn't seen for like 8 to 10 years. So that was weird because it's Japanese kids TV, right? So, and I have this weird nostalgia for it. Having watched it when my daughter was young. She's way too old for that show now, but the last thing she wanted to watch was Alien. So but I'm not doing a summary for Aliens today. I guess I'm going to go for 12 Monkeys, am I?
I guess it's not an inappropriate film to spend 10 minutes talking about feeling sick. So
no, that's why I kept riffing on that, because it seemed like a winner. So what is it about? Let's get into that. Okay. James Cole is a prisoner living underground in a future where the Earth's surface has become uninhabitable due to a deadly virus. In exchange for a pardon, Cole is sent back in time to collect information that can cure the virus, though he will not be able to stop the cataclysm. On his first journey, he ends up in 1990, 6 years before the plague. Unable to properly navigate the past, he ends up in a mental institution where he meets Jeffrey Goins, son of a biotech czar whose company is in possession of a potential deadly virus. Cole is quickly brought back to his present, having failed, and then is properly sent back into 1996 with a brief jaunt to World War I. In 1996, he kidnaps Dr. Catherine Riley, who was his doctor in the 1990 mental institution. The two go looking for information about Goins' eco-terrorist organization, the Army of the 12 Monkeys, Riley coming against her will. Having gained some information, Cole returns to the future, which he now believes is his own delusion, while Riley becomes convinced that Cole was actually from the future. Cole becomes obsessed with returning to the past to get more information, and the scientists do so because he is qualified. He finds Riley again shortly before the plague is unleashed, convinced that he is crazy while Riley is trying to help him solve the 12 monkeys dilemma. As it turns out, the 12 monkeys truly are nuts, with their plan simply being to unleash all the animals from the Philadelphia Zoo. The real villain all along was the dad from Contact, who lets loose the virus in the Philadelphia airport, with Cole and Riley chasing him, Cole being shot by the police after running through security. Interestingly enough, his young self is also at the airport watching himself die. Okay, 2/3 of that was written, and the last third was riffed because it was midnight last night. It's like I could get proper sleep, or I could write the synopsis now, and I chose proper sleep. And
you couldn't tell at all.
Okay, I could tell at the end, but I actually want to talk about Brad Pitt first. Like I said, I was in high school when this movie came out, and all the guys hated Brad Pitt because he was the pretty boy.
He was in his hunk era.
Right. Legends of the Fall, Interview with a Vampire, like you're trying to get a date for the homecoming and everyone's got a Brad Pitt poster in their locker. It also helped that my dad, for some reason, had some like irrational hatred towards Legends of the Fall. So, I just put him in the dumpster where I would, who would go in there now? I haven't even watched him that much, but I guess he's occupies then what would now be like the Zac Efron space of a few years ago. I don't even know who it would be now.
I think there was a period where guys in my generation hated Robert Pattinson. Which he's won them around by just being a hilarious guy.
I was going to say, and you look very foolish for that now, don't you?
I said
not if you watch Twilight.
The Twilighters were right once again.
Oh, don't worry, I watched and read all the Twilights.
the Twihards. Was that what they were called? Maybe they didn't have like special stand names back then. Maybe
you had to be, because within the Twilight fans, you then had to be Team Edward or Jacob. So
I dodged that bullet. My wife's American friend gave her the first Twilight book because she loved it. I think my wife read half of it, hated it, so we didn't delve any deeper. And I wasn't going there myself, although I may get dragged in by this podcast at some point. So, but that'll be fun in its own right, yeah. But yeah. The point is having Brad Pitt like go with such a insane character in this movie after doing all the pretty boy stuff. We're in the theater like, whoa, this is great. And watching it last time, I feel like, how does he do that with his eye? I mean, it's almost like now you'd be like, oh, they digitally screwed up his eye. But in 1995, no, that
it's a contact lens.
There we go. Thank you. It looks quite insane. So
it does. Well. It does look insane. But no, he's fantastic. He's so watchable in it. And yeah, it's one of those things that I've always felt for Brad Pitt as he's got older. You sort of get to see, I sometimes think it can be a bit of a blessing when you're an actor getting a bit older. Well, this is if you're a man, obviously. And you don't fit the like pretty boy hero roles quite anymore. And you almost get to break out of them a bit and have a bit of fun. And I really feel that's sort of what I felt Brad Pitt's late career has been. He sort of gets to play more fun, adventurous roles where he can be a bit funny. And actually, watching this is kind of a sign that it wasn't that he just like, got better at them as he got older. He was always good at playing, fun characters. What do you call them? Not side characters, but like a character. He always had the ability to be a character actor. Yeah.
He was just a bit too handsome.
But his beautiful face just didn't let him do enough of it.
Yeah, I see. I feel like I've actually missed most of Brad Pitt's films. So all I can really think of is Troy, and I remember him. He's perfect in that because he looks like a Greek god. And then Since then, right. I've just seen the more recent stuff, like Burn After Reading and things, where he's actually really good actor.
In peak hunk era Brad Pitt, I'm thinking. Well, he's in Selma and Louise. Troy, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Remember that?
Yeah.
I think I saw it once and I don't remember anything about it.
Yeah, well, the legend is that's where he meets Angelina Jolie and falls in love. And if that's true, then it's like shocking because they have absolutely no chemistry in that movie whatsoever.
My main memory of that movie is that it has the like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid ending, but then everyone lives.
Yeah.
What if we took all of the gravitas out of that famous thematic ending?
Probably could make an interesting side trip. This is pretty smack in peak Willis, but not quite, I guess, like super high budget Willis films. Because after this, it goes straight into Armageddon and The Fifth Element, which do have massive budgets. This one not. I mean, Terry Gilliam never gets a big budget for whatever reason. Probably because his films are nuts. Fantastic, but nuts. That could have something to do with it. But this is definitely a switch for Willis as well, because I think this is where he stopped completely being like the, Die Hard guy or moonlighting guy if you're like really into television. Again, he's playing a little. This does seem like the Bruce Willis type now, but at the time he was a little more of a, like John McClane complains to himself and things, but he doesn't necessarily just go. He doesn't become a whack job.
Yeah, but the character of Cole is, is very different. You think because he's so vulnerable for so much of the film. His kind of Bruce Willis ability, I suppose, is that he can carry himself. He can. They know he can fight. So early on when he's brought into the police station, they'd say he took down one police officer just with his bare hands. So that's kind of Bruce Willis-esque, but he's also just like so adrift in the future. And it's one of the features I really like about this film is that it's still quite rare that time travel isn't sort of configured as easy. It's not easy on the body and it's like not easy on the mind. And the whole reason that they send, prisoners from this colony out there are because they're expendable, essentially. And they say early on, very few of them make it. We need strong-willed ones. So you can kind of see that he's almost sort of from the very beginning kind of fracturing and drooling, and he's kind of completely hopeless, which is not really the Bruce Willis character at the time, I think.
It wasn't, but at the same time, I think everyone had said what separated Bruce Willis from the action stars before him was that he did have that slightly more human element. Like even in something like a Die Hard, he is struggling a lot more than the Stallones and the Schwarzeneggers and the Van Dammes had the decade before. But yeah, this is a really smart choice, I think, on his part to do a film like this that shows such a different side of him, and maybe would have helped show that, like, actually this guy's got legs beyond just doing a few more Die Hard sequels.
One thing about the James Cole character, so I think the audience at this point, even still, you identify with Bruce Willis. James Cole is pretty unsympathetic. I mean, it's said he is like a violent criminal from the start, right? And some of the things he does is just kind of, pretty whack when he goes to the past, again, because his mind is fracturing. But the character is very difficult to identify with or sort of be the audience surrogate.
Guys, just bear with me 1 second. My cat has wandered into the room and is jingling, so I'm just going to take his collar off.
Okay.
I didn't hear a cat, but
I heard a brief jingle, and I think I guessed it was a cat. But I don't complain about cat sounds.
Yeah. I guess. Well, there's trains and stuff outside, so you never know when there'll be a jingle or something. But finishing my point, unlike our other recording, James Cole is not easy to identify with in pretty much every way.
I like they never actually tell us what he's in prison for.
They say it's violent. I mean,
Yeah,
that who knows what that means in
because
this
we
weird
do,
Gilliam dystopia. But
when we see him being violent in the film, it's basically all self-defense. So I was almost worried the film was going to finally show us what he'd done, and it would have been him like, oh, he refused to follow the orders of the quarantine. He wanted to be with the woman he loved or whatever. And I was going to be like, oh, wow, this is a film about like an anti-vax hero. But actually, it really doesn't show us anything about his life between seeing the traumatic incident as a kid and we meet him in prison. We have no idea what he did or why he's there.
Yeah, I mean, it never really bothered me because you don't particularly get the sense that it's a fantastic society in which he's been imprisoned in, right? It certainly feels very dystopian, very authoritarian, very few resources. So the kind of fact he was a convict, and even for a violent crime, to me, I think, yeah, probably good they left it ambiguous because it could go either way, right? Maybe he is kind of was a real scumbag before all of this started, and all of this kind of makes a redemptive arc for him essentially. Or maybe he was just, in the wrong place at the wrong time in this kind of quite terrible world that the future is.
Well, considering what the film, I think, is trying to say about how mental health patients are treated, I could see that it is meant to make us think like, oh, maybe I shouldn't just assume everyone who's in the prison system is a bad guy.
Yeah, that's true. But
oh, yeah.
In the end, I think like when it's insinuated that he's just like done something horrible with Dr. Riley, the audience could probably accept that James Cole could have done that, but Bruce Willis, no way. So there is that kind of weird, like you last night when I was talking to you were actually right at that point of the film, right, Luke?
Yeah, because I'd watched part of it on my lunch and was going to finish it in the evening, and it had just cut away, and I'm like, what just happened? You can't just do that. I can't spend the next 10 minutes not knowing if my hero in this movie is like a sexual predator.
So you spent 12 hours instead.
Yeah.
Moving down the list, man, I didn't even realize that Christopher Plummer was our Southern madman. It just didn't like strike. But now I'm like, oh yeah, of course he was.
Yeah.
So, hey, I mean, coming from the deep South, it was not a completely authentic accent, but it was an awesome accent. He was sort of come on, doing the foghorn leghorn thing, which was always fun. I guess he was really foghorn leghorn. I mean, very cartoony role, and while they're watching the Marx Brothers on TV, that Gilliam was one of the Pythons, so it makes sense.
Yeah. The little guest role that I really loved was Frank Gorshin as her boss, bit of the Riddler in there.
Yeah, that also, I just watched the Twilight Zones he was in, and even then I didn't. I guess it's 30 years later, so you can be forgiven for not.
Right.
I'm just saying, because I'm looking at the cast list here, right?
Oh no, no, I knew who he was right away, and I actually just assumed he was going to be a bigger role and be like our main villain because I'm so used to that actor, but he was actually meant to be playing quite a sensible character, but he was still just really hamming it up as this weirdo, so that was great.
Sorry guys, I've been joined by my cat. You can see him on the
Oh, that is quite all right.
That's fine. If people are on YouTube, they may, people like cat videos, right?
Maybe more than 4 people will watch this one.
So
we haven't really spoken about
Madeline Stowe, Dr. Riley. Yeah, she again, when you're talking about, I think all of us were like, what about Madeline when you're mentioning how someone like Brad Pitt ages out well, because I'm bringing up her filmography, and someone I feel like I haven't seen much. Wow, her last acting credit actually is 2003, so she completely quit, focused on motherhood. I never thought I'm retiring, but I didn't feel that thing revving in me. So I guess she just kind of got out of the game more or less. It looks like she's done a little bit of TV recently, having a regular on one, showing up in the 12 Monkeys TV show, which I actually know nothing about, and So she's doing some TV. Okay, she's out there, but I have not seen her recently, and that seems legit.
Yeah, even looking at her actual filmography when she was active, I don't really think I've seen anything she was in besides this.
Last of Mohicans was a pretty big hit back in the day.
I was going to
that
say,
was
I
massive.
think The Last of the Mohicans is the only thing I've seen her in as well.
Oh yeah, and The General's Daughter as well. I think bought a DVD of and never watched.
But that's well for her because based on 2 films, I'm like, oh yeah, she was one of the big actresses in the 90s. I'm like, oh, that's based on 2 films because I haven't seen any of these other ones. So
yeah, she was very good in this. I really, because obviously with Cole, we see him, he's completely disoriented, confused. You don't know if he's crazy or not right from the start of the film. Whereas we get to see her slowly break down as she realizes all of this stuff is true. So at the start of the film, she seems like quite a cold character. But by the end, she was our second lead, essentially.
The one short... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's a really compelling switch, right? Where he has almost just completely bought into the present day narrative of him being crazy and this all being an illusion, saying like I'm cognitively divergent, just at the very moment where she's realized that he is in fact from the future and everything he's saying is true. So you almost get to kind of see them switch round where suddenly he's trying to convince her that it's not real and she's trying to convince him it is. I thought that was a really charming narrative switch. It wasn't simply, you know, her sort of saying, oh, I realized you were right all along. It was actually just a complete flip of the 2 roles. I liked that a lot.
I remember when he's in the car and he first predicts, oh, the little boy's okay, it's going to be, you in your head, you think, oh, okay, well, that's the moment where it's all just going to figure itself out. But then when we finally get the scene where she knows it's true and he doesn't, he's actually trying to explain it away and telling her, no, we both saw it in the same TV show.
Yeah.
Like,
I really like that switch in the film, but then they have it go romantic right at the very end where it probably doesn't need to. And then they use the shorthand of a scene from Vertigo to kind of push it along as opposed to things that happen in the film. It's like you get the Vertigo scene, which is a great mysterious scene. And then suddenly they got, their soulmates or something, which is a little... Like if I were to criticize something about the script or whatever, using a iconic scene from another film to push your narrative seems a little bit lame.
Yeah, well, I
agree, but it's very restrained. Like, I'm not even sure they kiss on camera. It's like an implied kiss from his hands on her back.
A little later, they do very briefly kiss at the airport, but...
Oh, yes, they do. You're right.
But yeah, it was kind of sudden, but then the film had already earlier on basically told us that she has Stockholm syndrome. So
maybe
surprising. And he's like this first woman she's the first woman he's seen in like 20 years. So it's not unbelievable.
Just get out of prison after 20 years, see your new psychiatrist, and you're just like, you're my wife now.
Yeah, I mean,
like stepbrothers.
He's not in a position to have a stable relationship at this point, even if he's I mean, he is pretty nuts, he's also right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the facet of the film I found so wonderful, because I think it's one of those things where I often feel like lots of movies will do a thing where it's like, oh, are they crazy or are they right? And kind of one thing I liked about this movie is it kept on throwing in your face like, oh no, all of these kind of down and outs, all of these people on the street corners shouting about Jesus and things like that, and the people in the mental institution, they are crazy and they're also right. Do you know? Which, they're kind of, and just by the way the scenes are set up, the way you're kind of constantly first told that, this is all immediately pre-apocalypse, and then the way that all of the buildings are just shown to be in this constant decay. I thought it was just like this very cool motif, essentially, where it's just like, yeah, it is the end of the world, and the only sane response actually is to go crazy, is to go mad. Do you know? I don't know. I thought it was really gothic, really interesting, and it was just this whole understanding of this sort of underworld essentially, of madness. I thought it was just so compelling. I loved it.
I was actually surprised the film didn't lean more into we as the audience don't know if he's right or not. I was expecting it to be more of a sort of K-Pax deal, but we are shown very explicitly future scenes and him traveling back in time and him traveling to World War One. I think that at no point is the audience supposed to wonder if he's correct or not. Well, like my favorite films are the Terminator movies, and I was like, oh, so this is what would have happened if Reese hadn't escaped from the police station. Like, if they just kept on believing he was crazy.
Yeah.
Well, they get that narrative with Sarah Connor in the second one, don't they?
Yeah.
Where she is in there. So I do wonder if maybe they were, again, Gilliam may have been avoiding that particular streak, because I think the film he made before this, it might have been 2 films before, was The Fisher King, where a depressing Robin Williams again, where it is extremely ambiguous, what's going on.
Okay.
So he might have just, from a creator's point of view, been like, I don't want to like repeat myself too hard. And there's so much to his style. You put this in Brazil next to each other, and you could almost like swap scenes back and forth, just because his design aesthetic is so individualized, I guess.
Yeah.
They're your words better than mine.
Like you said, Annie, I think it is. I prefer this angle of there's not the dichotomy between right and crazy. And I like that it doesn't make it just like, as soon as she accepts him, suddenly he's fine and normal.
Yeah.
Like, he still had a terrible traumatic life, and he still had his mind messed up by all the drugs they put him on. So he's not suddenly going to be completely coherent just because everyone believes him.
Yeah, and the way that the scene that always sticks out to me, and has even since I was younger, is where the guy, they show a sort of montage of just to show you where you are, setting the scene, and then in one shot there's a guy who's a street preacher who stood up and clearly really disheveled and is speaking the end of days and things like that. And the second shot that you see that guy in, Bruce Willis is walking past him in a hurry, and the street preacher stares at him and then just suddenly goes, "You're one of us." And I just thought that it stuck with me even for the first time I watched it, because it has such a, I feel like, compelling kind of idea of this underclass of people essentially having been discarded from the future, in the past. The process of time travel is so traumatic that it drives most people mad, which is something that they imply very heavily early on in the first scene. And it suddenly kind of makes you reassess essentially all of that kind of backdrop essentially of kind of urban life, both in the movie and I think out of it, that these people have just been discarded by this terrible regime. They've been driven mad by their experiences, and now they're kind of on the streets. And there's another character who's a bit more prominent who appears first talking sort of disembodiedly to Bruce Willis, and then as an actual down and out just under a bridge. And he says to him, the way they track you is through your teeth, and they can't do that to me anymore, and sort of bares his teeth at him, and he's taken all of them out. And again, it's just this kind of very just sort of compelling, I think, theme essentially, that there isn't a dichotomy, as you say. I think it's so fascinating, and I've rarely seen it done that well in many science fiction movies or fantasy or whatever.
Yeah, my note for the street preacher was just I wrote it and erased it, which is, hey, this preacher seems like he's straight out of Monty Python. Wait a minute, that's a
Well, even Brad Pitt's character, who is the villain, he's got his quirks and he's crazy, but he's just an animal rights activist, which isn't necessarily the wrong side of history to be on. So And then it turns out he didn't even release the virus. He just wanted to let the animals out of the zoo and put his dad in a cage. So
yeah, that's a fantastic reveal. Yeah, to everyone here who hasn't seen 12 Monkeys, to all of your audience, I apologize, but I'm just going to barrel right in with the spoiler.
It's fine. Matt just read them the whole plot, so
that's true. But it was a fantastic reveal that the 12 Monkeys animal rights activist group had nothing to do with it, and what they'd written for We Did It was just this kind of very juvenile prank of releasing all the zoo animals.
Those tigers probably took somebody out.
You're right. Yeah. All right. I apologize to all of the people in the fictional 12 Monkeys universe who lost their lives on that day to the zoo, the 12 Monkeys terrorist act of releasing the
if the listeners and viewers at home have been affected by tiger attacks, then please put the number on screen.
But hey, we did it. We did it. 5 people ate it, right? So maybe not 5 billion, but 5 billion. You know, when do lives start counting, man?
Well, didn't Stalin say it's the other way around? 1 death is a tragedy and 1 million is a statistic.
That's if you're Stalin.
Well, that's how it feels playing Pikmin.
Right. Now, Luke, one thing, because we think of 12 Monkeys as the virus movie, but we've been talking about mental health most of the time, and this really does seem to fall pretty nicely into the mental health bin. A little like the virus thing is kind of like window dressing almost.
Well, you never see the virus. Yeah, it's it's like the plot point, but you actually you never see anyone sick with it. So it's not really a virus movie at all, even though, I think because it has the logo of this movie, the poster of the movie had the do you know what I mean?
Oh, the
biohazard symbol on it. So I think I always think of it as a virus movie, but you bang on, it's not actually.
I think it's like the virus could have been replaced with a nuclear war, but I guess they wanted to differentiate themselves from a lot of time travel post-apocalypse movies and have a slightly different apocalypse. In fact, the film makes more of a point of the animals have replaced us is what the future event is. The virus is just the means for that to happen. Yeah,
it can be a Planet of the Apes situation.
Yeah.
You know, I was going to say, I tend to confuse the end of this movie with the end of the Planet. Which is Dawn is the first, Rise? I don't remember, but
right, yeah, the names would make more sense if it went Dawn, Rise, but actually it goes Rise, Dawn.
Okay, that's cool. I'm not being flippant. I do like that movie. I just
completely
confusing the titles is all. But I think this is the first time where a virus really was like the the linchpin of the situation, because it was just a couple years after this outbreak was. Well, I mean, there's Andromeda strain 20 years earlier, but that's kind of a different thing. After we get like Outbreak, there was some other twin movie to that at the time.
I think the problem is just a virus isn't as exciting on screen as stuff exploding or monsters attacking, or I mean, it could be a virus, but even something like zombies, there's something to look at. Whereas purely just it's a virus. Well, like the guy says, it's invisible.
Yeah.
So it's not as, if you're making like an action movie or a spectacle movie, there's a bit less to see. Although you didn't mention in your synopsis, Matt, when he gets on the plane with the virus, the passenger next to him is one of the scientists from the future.
Right. So I guess she took quite a. I mean, obviously that was the big moment, because her going back, and the scientists clearly don't want to be the ones doing it. So,
but I mean,
she says something like, "I'm an insurance as well."
Yeah. So they did at least get their sample in the end, because prior to that, I was like, "Wow, what an incredibly bleak ending."
Yeah,
he's failed to stop the guy. He's failed his mission. He's just
he gets shot by fucking airport security. I don't know what they call them in America.
I put like when he makes his phone call, I'm like, okay, he's actually doing his job. So and that was, he didn't have to, as he said, but that was the thing that actually got everything underway, because that's where they figure out, who actually did it and can now focus on him. And there is the fatalist aspect, Luke going against your tattoo with no fate.
Recently, I think you were talking to Mark, I can't remember what the podcast, and he was complaining about Nolan films like Tenet and Interstellar having basically the future's written because of the time travel element. And this film is that taken to an absolute extreme. Like, this kid saw his own death and has spent his whole life building up to the moment where he lives it again. Like, they say constantly, like, we can't stop the virus. It's just about getting the information to make a cure in the future. The film is extremely fatalist.
So what are they doing to time? I guess time is like a not a basketball, but the one you'd have in the kindergartens. They're a little more squishy, so you can kind of push on it here and there, but you can't really change it.
Yeah, I think their angle is that, like, they can change things in the past because everyone's going to die anyway, but they can't change their own future. But because obviously
there's one point where I mean, it's funny given what Bruce Willis would go on to do, but he says something like he kills somebody because he's attacking the doctor, and she is obviously shocked that he's just murdered this man, and then he says something like, all I see are dead people anyway, or something like that, meaning they're all about to die from the virus. But given that he then goes on to do the Sixth Sense, it is a bit of a like haha kind of line.
Now, Bruce sees dead people is one of my notes here. And then quite a brutal ass kicking there too. So
but throughout the film we can see that he had already seen his own death. So all of the time travel has, I guess, already happened in this scenario. It's Terminator 1, it's not Terminator 2.
I was thinking it's kind of lost with the whole course correction thing. Again, you can modify, you can have new experiences, but you can't actually change anything.
Well, see, I don't think they were even modifying. I think it was all, the loop had already happened in this version.
Yeah, it was all just information gathering, which I don't know. Now we can get into Bill and Ted things where at the end they're like, well, as long as we do this later, it'll, it'll fit in now. So later we'll do this. And all of that. It was interesting with people getting launched back, and with that in mind, getting launched in completely inappropriate times. The one guy's like, I ended up in like 1888. Bruce ends up, 6 years early, and then in World War I to get shot. So, which of course turns out to be the proof, because at first, like, why is it? I mean, it's fun. It's kind of weird, but wow, that's intense. And that these future scientists who admittedly don't have resources and seem perfectly nuts on their own are, obviously making some notable mistakes. Oh, yeah, well, we got you down target this time.
There are some moments where the film is just too Terry Gilliam for its own good. And
I loved that.
It meant to be like, okay, this stuff is definitely real. So why are all the scientists standing around his bed singing songs?
We're trying to be nice.
It really was like the most Terry Gilliam-esque time travel, I think, where it's just like, yes, we have this technology. It's run by grotesque madmen, and they really don't get it right most of the time. And it's just kind of really, a snowball's chance in hell that you will get where you're meant to be, the place you're meant to be. And also it drives you mad. It will probably make you lose your mind just through doing it. I loved all of that. I think sometimes time travel can be too clean in sci-fi movies. And this was just the complete opposite of that. It's just like a messy, horrible process, which, as you say, none of the scientists actually want to do themselves. They just make convicts do it, right? It's like the kind of futuristic version of, sending people to the penal colonies in Australia. It just had that kind of vibe to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, even within like Terminator, the first film, it seems incredibly painful to travel through time, and they make a point of like, we could only send one because it's such a difficult. And then by the second, by all the sequels, it's just like, oh yeah, they're just constantly sending Terminators back in time. It's like, this one guy annoyed us, so we're going to send a Terminator to kill him. It's just the done thing. But I can't think of a lot of other time travel stuff where it's inaccurate is part of the thing, where it's just like, well, we're going to shoot you vaguely back in time and hopefully it's the right year.
I think this probably is one of the first of the kind of puzzle box movies. Up to this point, I mean, maybe Twin Peaks did that a little bit. David Lynch, sure, he has literal puzzle boxes in his movies, but
but you're not really meant to solve David Lynch's ones.
Yeah, you're not supposed to solve his, but this one is the puzzle box that actually kind of fits together. And I don't recall seeing ones along these lines much before that. Before that would have been, again, like the Fisher King or Jacob's Ladder, which were more like mid-level, just straight up weirdo films. Good ones, but weird.
There's a puzzle box element, but the actual mysteries are not that complex. It's more about the emotional conclusions it brings the characters to. Like, the film isn't like, oh, what a smart twist. It's like, oh, that's kind of sad for that guy. So it doesn't feel quite like like a J.J. Abrams puzzle box where you're just like, oh, yeah, okay, you're very clever. Next. Like, it did actually, it felt satisfying as a film, even though, yeah, there is an element of puzzle box solving to like the way the script is constructed.
Not to be the guy that's comparing this to that, but did anyone see La Jetée, which is the 1960s experimental film by Chris Marker? And I still don't know if that's Chris isn't a man or a woman, but
no, because I only found out it existed when I read the Wikipedia article for 12 Monkeys this morning.
Okay.
Yeah, I only found out it existed when I was watching the credits for 12 Monkeys this night.
Okay, back in my old man days in the 90s, I remember, I had Film Geek friends, and somehow one of my friends had it on videotape and we watched it, and I remember being disappointed. It's never been on a 12 Monkeys release, and I have it on a Criterion disc with another experimental film, which is Sans Soleil. But that's an interesting one. It's the bones of this movie done completely through black and white photography. Everything is a still image, except there's one shot of movement. I don't even remember what it is. I mean, it's only like 15 minutes long, but it does have the core idea of scientists sending someone into the past to find information and them just going nuts. So this has a bunch of shots of them in a bed, like, with gauze over their eyes, like, wigging out and all that sort of thing. It's 12 Monkeys is definitely like, the full dinner. La Jetée is an interesting appetizer. It's interesting Gilliam took such a obvious experimental film and decided to just flesh it out this much. So maybe that's where he had the excuse of, I can Gilliam this one up as much as I want to, because the
it's not like the source material is pretty straight laced.
Yeah, the source material is plenty whack as well, but I do recommend it. I assume it's probably on YouTube now. So
see, that it makes a certain sense, because I can't explain or justify this in any way, but this film does feel really French.
Okay, that probably does it. It's got the steampunk vibe of Euro Disneyland.
Yeah.
Tomorrowland. I mean.
You know what, Luke? Like, I don't know what you mean, and yet I do know what you mean, and
right?
I think I agree. Yes.
Yeah, it's just a vibe.
It is just a vibe. It's just a feeling I get from it. You're so right. It's spiritually a French film.
Yeah. It'd be the haircuts.
Maybe. I think it's also just that because of the era and the aesthetic, the films I compare it to are obviously Brazil, but then Fifth Element. It's got that same slightly...
Luc Besson is probably the director of the same era, who is kind of doing the same slightly inventive kind of sci-fi aesthetics with kind of these very sort of impressive and elaborate sets and things like that. Yeah.
The only other film I can think of whose future looks like this is the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Yeah, I would say what's it called? The movie that's set on a train. Not Storm Chaser, Snowpiercer.
Snowpiercer?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a lot more recent.
That kind of looks to me like a Gilliam film, but I also think it's very aware it looks like a Gilliam film, and they even make reference to Terry Gilliam in the film, if I remember correctly.
This is the first time anyone's talked about Snowpiercer that actually makes me want to see it. So I always thought it looked really dull.
Yeah, it looks a lot like a Gilliam film, and I think even possibly one of the characters is called Terry Gilliam, or there's a carriage which is called the Gilliam carriage, or something like that, where it's just a bit like, okay, I see what you're doing. Yeah.
Fun fact: also adapted from a French origin,
but directed by a Korean filmmaker.
You know what?
Yeah,
this is the final puzzle box, and we are pulling apart all of the pieces right now.
All your science fiction is French, or at least the surreal end of it. Well, hey, Jules Verne, right? Although you're an H.G. Wells guy, though. So.
Yeah. I was born in Woking. I don't have a choice in that matter.
Right, I get that. But that's the strain again in the Euro Disney Tomorrowland and all of that. So there is a distinct little French flair to, I guess, some if it seems like the tourist attraction next to the Moulin Rouge or something, right? But just Snowpiercer. Have we talked Snowpiercer before?
It came up a little bit when we did our Soylent Green episode, and I'm sure it's on the short list that we'll cover it eventually.
I'll say it again when we do it then. But the thing that really made me like that film is probably there was an insane snowstorm about 7 years ago, and there was a full-on meter of snow in a town. This is not Nagano, by the way. This is a Kanto. But there was like a meter of snow on the ground, and just everything was shut down. And like 2 days later, things started opening again. I remember going to a 7-Eleven and just fleecing it for everything because I was like, I don't know. And having to totally trudge through the snow for that. But about 2 days later, the theater finally opened. They had Snowpiercer. So I had to like drag myself through like what was at least still a half meter of snow to see Snowpiercer by myself. So, set and setting sometimes helps a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess we'll get, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's like, you really can't enjoy a Christmas film if you try and watch it in July.
Let's Die Hard. Can you enjoy Die Hard in July?
I probably could, but I tend to only watch it around that.
Hey, this is a Christmas film. 12 Monkeys is a Christmas film. You just watched it.
Yeah, it's not a very.
That is actually true.
Get your family around the telly for Christmas and put on 12 Monkeys. So I actually am curious how we're going to say this film holds up today, because in a world where we think more about viruses, it doesn't, and that's notable. As a movie it seems to, but just I guess the world perspective of this movie doesn't quite hold up in an interesting way.
Well,
I think we all now know that Earth would never have their act together enough to set up a system where people all mass escape to space or go underground into old colonies.
There will be a mass colony underground, but it's all going to be the kind of people I don't want to live in a mass colony underground with.
Yeah, it's going to be Elon Musk and his like harem and no one else.
There's a Moonraker kind of that's the Moonraker plan. I think that's what Elon Musk is up to. His name's similar to the dude in that Bond film too. Yeah.
Did you see who they sent into space recently though, Matt?
Space tourists?
Shatner.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're sending Shatner into space.
Oh, future tense, sending Shatner.
I can't remember if they have sent or are sending, but yeah.
Okay, because it was maybe 2 weeks ago where they're like, oh, we're sending a bunch of straight up civilians into space. I mean, obviously they got trained because they have to run systems and things. But
my favorite was when NASA officially declared that like Jeff Bezos and that are not astronauts. They do not qualify as astronauts because they flew an airplane real high for 5 minutes.
That takes the first American space out of contention too, though. I guess
Yeah,
he made
probably.
it 15 minutes. But where were we? 12 Monkeys holding up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
we're not moving underground. We're not going to get it together that much. Although, currently, obviously, not seeing what the virus does in this movie, like you couldn't get away with that now. Even Planet of the Apes had to show, a few people like hacking blood into
Have a nosebleed and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, like the thing is, this film isn't really about the virus. And I think the idea of how mental health and the prison system and all of that is just this big cycle to keep you out of society and make it impossible for you to like get your life back. That's probably only more relevant and is something that people are more aware of. So that might be another reason why, for me and yourself, Annie, this film was easier to watch now, and I really get it now. Whereas maybe I didn't when I tried to watch it as a kid, because when I was a kid, I thought, well, you know, the guys in prison are bad guys, and I want Bruce Willis to be a good guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably actually really true. That message specifically sort of seemed to be much more interesting, much more compelling, purely because I am like have a bit more life experience and a bit more of a worldview where you're like, oh, sorry, cat on the loose, where you, where that seems so much more kind of interesting and and relevant. I would say probably I'm not sure like the sexual politics would hold today. I don't really know if you could get away with a little cheeky kind of like, ooh, did he rape and murder that woman? You'll have to wait and see kind of thing.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked.
Throwing her in the butte was still pretty raw as well when you get right down to it.
Yeah. And all of that stuff makes the sudden, unearned, random turn to romance at the end feel even more sticky. So,
well, we said it with Fifth Element. Bruce was creepy with the ladies in the mid-90s.
Oh, is that why this film feels French?
Oh.
Now you've offended the French. Come on, man. Relations aren't at their best at the moment.
It's fine. Europe already hates us. There's nothing I can say that's going to make it worse. I think this film is still worth watching today. I think it's definitely the one you have to say. It's got things to say that I can't think of many other films, especially in the sci-fi sphere, have tried to say.
Yeah.
And it's aesthetically, it's so unlike anything else from that period or now. It's not going to feel like it's aged. It's just going to feel as weird as it did when it came out.
I think you're so right that Gilliam aesthetic actually just is slightly timeless, because as you say, it's so alien and foreign anyway, that actually it doesn't kind of make you feel kind of like this is dated or this is weird. And especially for a film that's playing with time in that way, it doesn't really matter to you whether he's coming back to the present day or somewhere that looks very much like 20 years ago. Do you know? It's because of the whole idea is you're playing with time, you're moving through eras and time. It only kind of makes it just more understandable. You're like, sure, he's just moving back to the 90s.
I'm just thinking with filmmakers, like it's kind of these niche guys, right? You know, that the auteurs. Terry Gilliam still somehow occasionally gets a film made. He's, you know, what Sisyphus rolling the ball up the mountain every time, right? Although you sometimes gets his film made in the end. But I'm thinking, you know, like David Lynch doesn't really bother making new films anymore. John Waters certainly doesn't. A lot of these guys that did make films just in weird spaces can't seem to get it done so much anymore. I guess you gotta go to TV for that now.
I mean, I think everyone is struggling to get films made at the moment, so whether you're an auteur or not. But I think the problem is that there's no longer room for the middle budget movie. There's completely low budget indie, or there's $150 million extravaganzas, but no one is putting money in the middle anymore.
12 Monkeys is very much in the middle.
Right, that's where these guys used to shine. But you know, you're not going to give Terry Gilliam the next Marvel movie. And also,
you should.
100% you should, but they're not gonna.
We're doing Ant-Man. How awesome would that be?
Yeah.
But he wouldn't want to do it. He'd feel like he was selling out anyway. So probably because he's a bit of a iconoclast anyway. So I don't know. It's like I feel like we never. you just talk around the virus in this movie. I guess that's the thing. It seems like a big hit, but then you watch it, it's like, well, it's the MacGuffin of this movie. It's not the central core again. So because we just recorded, although it'll air next week with the Dawn of the Dead, and you mentioned, oh, maybe this was actually the fits more the modern vibe.
Yeah, Dawn of the Dead felt basically like it was predicting the exact events of the year 2020, whereas 12 Monkeys it's actually about something else. And like, yeah, you put it correctly, the virus is just a MacGuffin.
Yeah, and it's never really about they say the virus is airborne, and Bruce Willis gives some kind of, oh, it's so nice breathing this clean air, but it's really kind of a story where the earth itself is sick, the world is sick, and everything is decaying, and people are being driven mad, and there's nothing. When Bruce Willis returns to the 90s, you are quite clearly given a sense that this is a dying world, and actually that probably is more environmental, I guess, than viral. It sort of does feel a bit like, well, yeah, this world does, as we've told you at the very beginning, end with a virus, but it kind of looks like it's on its way out anyway, right? The very terrain itself seems to be sick.
Although it does seem like a lot of people in the past year and a half have been getting kookier. So even with this situation where I don't think any of us are quite willing to say the earth is dying at the moment, but people are definitely, getting their heads racked around, a lot.
Well, at the start of the virus, there were loads of people sharing on the internet like, oh, look at this field full of whatever's nature's healing because the humans aren't there. And I feel like that was a big theme in the 90s of like eco-villains who wanted to get rid of us so that the animals could have the planet back, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing I kind of liked about the movie, that it toys with that expectation, which, as you say, is a big thing in the 90s. And even further than that, it's like this really big thing in like the security services and the FBI and MI5 are all really like, concerned that eco-terrorists are going to be the next big thing. And loads of papers get like sort of, in terrorism studies get made about eco-terrorism. And it all turns to kind of just not. It just kind of doesn't happen. Which is kind of, which then it sort of then makes the kind of security services measures that they took lots of environmental groups, such as kind of like, sort of undercover agents and phone tapping and stuff like that. It makes it all look very cruel and kind of unnecessary. But the truth is they were just working to the intelligence that all of these security services had, which was that eco-terrorism was going to be huge. And so I kind of do like that it sort of this movie plays with that expectation. You're just like, yeah, this is going to be this hippie, environmental, kooky, animal loving group. And then it's not, it's like the scientist in a suit, so I kind of liked that that sort of twist, because it seemed probably quite, I imagine now it just feels like a twist, but I think actually it probably did have an element of political commentary at the time.
And I'm sure the oil lobbies didn't mind everyone hating the eco groups.
No.
Yeah, well, real eco-terrorism is crashing your tanker on a bunch of rocks.
Well, I think the reason that maybe the eco-terrorists never went as extreme as people were thinking they were going to is because their whole thing is built on compassion. It's not built on like hatred of anyone. It's just like, oh, we like animals. So that doesn't necessarily lend itself to I'm going to kill a bunch of people. But yeah, Thanos was right.
I guess I'll open the floor to any final thoughts on this one before we close up shop for the day. And anything we didn't get in?
No, I think I've got all my final thoughts out in the last 5 minutes.
That's what those minutes are for.
What? No, never mind.
What?
I was going to say, was there literally only one spoken female role, but there was at least 3.
Yeah, I don't think this one passes the Bechdel test.
No, I don't think any of them meet at any point. if they do, all they talk about is Bruce Willis. So
yeah. by the name Bruce Willis, yes. So I guess wrapping up, Annie, can you tell our listeners about your podcast or what you're up to?
Yes, absolutely. So you can hear me talk about conspiracy theories and the far right on QAnon Anonymous. I'm their UK correspondent. And you can hear me talk more generally about the history of disease and smallpox and the smallpox vaccine and the birth of the anti-vax movement, the first ever one, and Vaccine the Human Story, which is on all podcast apps and also on YouTube with some lovely visuals. So yeah, check us out.
It was quite a struggle getting it on the YouTube, right? With the name Vaccine.
It was such a struggle. I sort of knew it would be difficult, but I didn't know how difficult. Yeah, for a while I had to send people a direct link if they wanted to watch it. Because understandably, you say I'm making a documentary about vaccines and YouTube goes, whoa, okay, we're going to need to check you out. But they did check us out and we got the YouTube seal of approval. And now you can just search for us and we will be there, which is very exciting for us.
Excellent. I was going to ask if you had to make like the I an exclamation point or something.
Really pro-vax, guys. Yeah, I should have just put that in brackets. Should have been called Vaccine the Human Story, brackets, not anti-vax.
Well, you have to what you did last time, put pro. If you put not anti, that's like don't shut the door. What I hear is shut the door, right?
Yeah, so. You're right.
Well, just a touch of psychology. Hey, am I coherent enough not to have to do the blurb today?
Yeah, okay. You can find this podcast on Twitter at MLSFS110. You're also on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere where you can get podcasts. Just search Matt and Luke's Sci-Fi Sanctuary. You're already listening, so I presume you've done that, but give it 5 stars or whatever. Tell your friends. If you want to help keep it online, you can support this podcast and find the other podcasts me and Matt make by going to patreon.com/podcastio-podcastius. Which Matt always says is a Harry Potter reference. It's not. It's based on Peep Show. It
sounds really Harry Potter.
It's meant to be like Peep Show, where Johnson's company was called Consultio Consultius.
and just as a teaser, in next week's episode, you'll get to hear my completely stoned out attempt at doing that blurb.
Yeah, Matt cannot do the socials bit at the best of times. So when he was out of his mind yesterday, I made him do it.
Which I'm actually about to go get out of my mind again after this podcast because I have to do that 3 times a day for 3 more days.
One of Matt's lines was, "I think we're on Facebook, maybe." So
nice.
Well, Facebook has been out for 6 hours.
Leave them with the air of mystery. People love that. It's like maybe you can find us, maybe you can't.
Yeah, we might be on I was about to say some other internet, but that makes people think of the dark web.
And you can buy drugs from us at.
Yeah, to my knowledge, we're not on the dark web. Oh yeah, my old blog, which I guess not many people write blogs anymore, but I just see it get inundated with like bizarre ads like that. So sometimes I think I should go clean it up, but now I'm like, man, I don't care anymore. Is that bad? Should I care? Should I clean up my old Matt's?
It's very useful to digital historians.
Yeah.
The organic like evolution of those blogs.
It's just sad because 5 years ago I got actual comments, and now it's all ads for insane things. I don't know, Luke. I feel like you still end up getting the outro. So if you could take us to the future.
No, I really can't think of one, but that's okay, listeners, because don't worry, this is all in your head.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that